Hey guys, hello. Welcome to what episode are we on now? 226. Welcome to episode 226 of Be the CEO of Your Own Life podcast. I am Olga, your host, and as always, I am just so excited that you are here. And we are going to dive deep into the challenges professional women and men face and transform them into stepping stones for growth. Okay. So, as a coach, as a mindfulness teacher, and as a former therapist, today I am going to help you dive deep into the subject that resonates with many: imposter syndrome. That's a sneaky feeling of being a fraud despite evident success. Are you ready? So let's start with a story. Picture Sarah, a high executive. To the world, she is the picture of success. But inside, she's battling a constant fear of being a fraud. Sarah is like many women, and she's experiencing imposter syndrome. But why? Why do so many successful women feel like frauds? Imposter syndrome doesn't discriminate by levels of success or competency. It's rooted in a mix of personality traits like perfectionism and external factors, including the social environment, your upbringing. And as women, we often face societal pressures that can feed into these feelings. Like, raise your hand if you've ever felt imposter syndrome. No matter how confident you are, no matter how good you are at what you do, if you are somebody who's been successful, it is bound to happen that you're going to have at some point to you're going to have to deal with the feelings of imposter syndrome. My best wish for you here today is that after listening to this episode, you're going to have better ideas to how come you feel imposter syndrome, and that you notice that it's not just you, many of us do. But I also hope that you walk away with some tools that you can apply right away. So let's talk about how to overcome imposter syndrome. The first step is awareness. I don't know how many episodes I walk you through steps, and the first one is always self-awareness. If you're new here, you're going to start listening to this tip come back time after time. It's not just because I am a mindfulness teacher and a coach and a therapist, because all three of these professions lead to self-awareness. But put logic into this. How do you know where to go if you don't know where you are? Or if you haven't asked yourself, where am I going? Awareness is that piece of knowledge that tells you what's what. So, of course, in any kind of self-development, and yes, getting out of imposter syndrome has everything to do with personal development. We have to first become aware. Recognize that these feelings are there when they arise. Ask yourself, is this thought a fact or a feeling? And you guys are thinking, like, what kind of thoughts? Oh, well, let me give you examples. I don't belong here. This is a men industry. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I really have to prove myself. Oh my God, everybody seems so much more knowledgeable than I am. Here's where, when you become aware that you're having the feeling of fraud, I'm a fraud, they're going to find out anytime, or they give you a compliment and you're like, oh God, clearly you don't know me. Let me do a little bit more work. And then maybe you're going to notice that I'm not so great. After you have created self-awareness of the quality of the thoughts you're having about yourself, your status, your position, who you are, your capabilities, if you catch yourself saying to yourself something like, I do not belong here, this is your opportunity to think again. So rather than going with, I don't belong here, and supporting that thought, because you already asked yourself, is that true? Do I really not don't belong here? And hey, sometimes that's going to be the case. And you actually, they're not your people. You don't belong there and you're going to move on. Great. You do that. But the majority of times, that's not going to be the case. You're just uncomfortable. And that's okay. So I'm going to ask you to think again and come up with a new perspective. So instead of saying, I don't belong here, try, I was chosen here for a reason. It's about shifting your perspective. Instead of saying, I bring nothing to the table, ask yourself, what can I bring to this table with my particular set of skills, which likely are going to be different from anybody else at the table. And that is your superpower. In my coaching sessions, we dive deeper into these feelings. We use tools like reflective exercises and yes, mindfulness. And these aren't just about coping. We're not just trying to cope with the emotions of having thoughts about being an imposter, but they're about fundamentally changing the way in which we view ourselves and our achievements. We see the world as we are, not as it is. Because if we saw it as it is, we will be very factual. But turns out that we're not very factual. We have a lot of inaccurate thoughts that we think are truthful. So when we stop and ask ourselves, is that a fact? We're calling out the part of our brain that is not giving us facts. Anytime you don't feel that you belong, anytime you feel that you're not good enough to be, just that sense of not being good enough, is your own perception. So here's an exercise to try. Write down all of your achievements and skills it took to get there. I don't care if you're driving, you're going to make it a mental note to this exercise when you get home. You're going to write down all of your achievements and all the effort that it took to get there, the skills that it took to get there. Sometimes seeing in black and white can be incredibly powerful. I tell you that when I was opening my private practice, going from being employed to having my own private practice, having all the doubts, all the imposter syndrome possible. Who am I? My brain really wanted to study a little bit more and maybe wanted me to do a PhD and write a book and write research papers before I could help people. And had I bought into that, thought that I wasn't yet good enough to help people, I would still be studying, friends. Instead, I just went on to help hundreds of people and not do a PhD. So it's normal to have those moments of that, but it is very important if you do want to get out of imposter syndrome, especially if you're new in your profession and it's eating you away. It's so important that you do this. But I also coach people who are deep into their profession and they still step into arenas where they're not the best, and that brings them into imposter syndrome. So I want to remind you that overcoming imposter syndrome isn't about it's not an overnight process, okay? It's a journey. It's a step-by-step, it's a process. And on this journey, having a coach is transformative. A coach is like a mirror reflecting your true abilities and challenging those self-doubt narratives. That is what I do for most of my clients. That's what my coach does for me. When I show up and I say, who am I to be doing this? My coach asks me another set of interesting questions that allows me to think about, who am I not to be in this situation? So where does this imposter syndrome come from? Imposter syndrome comes from an already seated self-doubt. You had great dreams, and you also, the moment you had great dreams for your profession, you also had some doubts. Can I actually do it? And the moment that you start doing it, the self-sabotage kind of jumps in and says, okay, great, you're doing it, but for how long? How long can you do this? And then it strives for perfection, right? You want to just make it that you never make a mistake. And the moment you make a mistake, that voice comes out and be like, hey, you made a mistake. Clearly, they're going to notice that you're human that makes mistakes and you're not going to be good enough anymore, right? That internal battle of fear to be a fraud is only real in your brain. is a fear that appears real, but it isn't. These imposter thoughts, as they surface, you're going to notice that they're not facts, they're just feelings. And we start reframing your mind, like when you go into self-doubt of like, I'm not qualified, and you begin to change them for, I bring unique value. There's only one of me. Nobody here can do what I do the way I do it. You begin to build confidence. Confidence is essentially what's going to help you overcome imposter syndrome. And it happens one step at a time. And it happens with a clear intention that imposter syndrome is just a phase, but one that can stay here long if you don't face it. So when you're writing down like all of your achievements and the effort, you're going to notice that that's factual. And you're going to notice that, okay, truly, when I look at all the things that I've done, I'm starting to tell a story about who I am from a different perspective, where I might not believe 100% that I'm the most confident engineer, but after I read all of the achievements and the effort that it took me to get there, I can honestly go to a job interview and say, I'm somebody who works really hard and has made it places due to that hard work. Another powerful tool is storytelling. So sharing your experiences with trusted peers and mentors. You often will find that you're not alone in these feelings. This sharing can be incredibly validating. And by doing so, it becomes empowering. So when you're telling people like, oh my God, sometimes I was coaching actually my group of Be the CEO of Your Own Life. Again, these are not real CEOs necessarily. There might be, but they're just like regular humans like you and I who want to CEO their life. And imposter syndrome is a subject that has showed up from time to time. And when one person opened up and said, listen, I'm about to speak in front of all this amount of people and they're all very knowledgeable. And I do wonder, why did they ask me to be a keynote speaker? It's so interesting when somebody shares that story that so many of us in the group will raise our hand and be like, hey, that happened to me one time. I was going to talk in front of doctors and I'm not a doctor. And I asked myself, who am I to be talking to doctors? Right? So when you share this story, you realize that this is more common than it's not. And somehow that gives you some confidence. So finding some level of validation is not a terrible idea. Actually, it could be really empowering. Now let's delve deeper into societal aspects, okay? As women, we often face a paradox. The expectation to be flawless, right? That perfectionism, yet modest. Oh, did I do that perfect? Ooh, I didn't mean to. And also having all of these achievements. This paradox can feed imposter syndrome. Why? Because we're aiming to like be perfect and super achieved and modest. Like, how does that even work? Right? Like when we're like, but you gotta be modest, you gotta be humble. So I don't celebrate my success. But if I don't celebrate my success, how do I sit in this group with all these guys who all they're sharing is how successful they are? How does that look like? So this paradox can feed imposter syndrome because it feeds that anxiety that you are not good enough. So when you can recognize the external pressures that you might have coming into a room, that you are a woman and you're supposed to be flawless according to society, and you're also supposed to have a lot of achievements, and be humble and quiet. Just understanding that our society rolls that way can help you overcome and understand where imposter syndrome comes from. Nobody will suffer from imposter syndrome if we made it totally okay to be imperfect, to be in that growth mindset where we all know that if we put effort, we can learn, that we were not born knowing it all, that nobody starts a job being perfect at it. When they bring a new associate into the office, when there is a new manager, we all have great expectations. Oh, wow, they must know so much. They're going to do so great. And that person knows this about themselves. And they're like, oh, shit, they gave me this title. I must know a lot. What if I don't know? And that's a question I have from a lot of my clients. What if they ask me a question I don't have the answer to? What if? I mean, I hope they do. Do you hold answers to all questions? What are you, God? No, no. We have to make it okay for ourselves and our peers and our managers and anybody to not have all the answers And then we can begin to break the culture of imposter syndrome. A critical part of my coaching involves exploring these dynamics of society, specifically as it impacts my client. Because although there's like the greater culture, we have an inner culture and an inner dialogue and our own inner rules. And so in coaching, together we work on the strategies that help you navigate those external and internal pressures while building a more resilient and more comfort in being your authentic self, which, by the way, will always have flaws because you're human. I want you to think to yourself, what will be available to you if you were to no longer have imposter syndrome as your form, your chosen format to respond to challenges at work, to a new work environment, to success. Notice how imposter syndrome shows up when you're successful. It doesn't show up when you're not being successful. It only shows up as you respond to success. Hey, you got a promotion? Imposter syndrome. You got a raise? Imposter syndrome. You got a new job? Imposter syndrome. You got invited to do something that you normally wouldn't do because they liked your set of skills. So, like, really great. You were picked. Imposter syndrome. What will be available to you if you were to embrace success, to let it be, to let you feel success? What if you were not so allergic to success? Yes, I'm proposing imposter syndrome is the direct result of you not allowing for your own success, rejecting success. Your worst nightmare is to not be successful. And yet, when you have success, when you are in success mode, you turn to rejecting it? Makes no sense. Ladies, let's grow our tolerance for success. This is perhaps one of the better tools to have for your own personal development. I am going to befriend success. I am going to get rid of all the limiting beliefs, including imposter syndrome as a behavior, to stop me from feeling successful. Every success person I know, even when they just fall in love. I was just coaching a client of mine. I finally fell in love with the exact person I wanted to. He is perfect, beginning to end. Perfect for me, what I wanted. And I can't get rid of the fear that he's going to leave me one day if I'm not perfect. That's imposter syndrome, showing up as you have the success story of love that you wanted. So imposter syndrome goes whatever you invited. And so long as you do not befriend success, you will have some imposter syndrome. So let's normalize imposter syndrome. It is that fear of whoa, I'm being successful, but let's also not choose it as our response. If it happens automatically, okay, no problem, we're human. But when we can choose, what will you choose? What will you choose instead of imposter syndrome? What if you chose to think, what a freaking gift I'm giving this company by showing up here today? They have no idea how lucky they are that I came to speak to their organization. I am about to gift them with my unique presence, my unique ideas, my background, my experiences. Those thoughts are available to you. Even if you become like my clients and you think of it as jokingly, okay, I'm going to play an Olga card and I'm going to think to myself, they are so lucky that I'm coming to this meeting. But you know what happens in that process? They laugh, they like it, and they do show up to those meetings, not as a fraud, but as who they are authentically. And that is how imposter syndrome gets to be diminished. You think imposter syndrome is protecting you. Well, if I think I'm the best, I'm going to show up there and be what? Not humble? If I think I'm the best and they point out a mistake that I made, how can I handle it? You just know you're going to fail at things. We're aiming to fail at things. Part of success is that we tried many things, many ways, and it didn't work out. And then we got that lead to success. Oh, now I know that if I try to write with my left hand, the handwriting is not clear. Great information to have. I failed at writing with my left hand so that I could learn that my right hand is the way to go. If you're struggling with imposter syndrome, do not ignore it. Do normalize it, but do not ignore it. Work at it, face it. Because when you are in imposter syndrome mode, you are depriving the world from your gifts, from your brilliancy. Whether you want to argue with me or not that you're brilliant, I know you are. You have a unique gift. You have a unique way of folding the laundry, even if that's all you're doing. And that is your way to do it. And the world needs to see it. And you need to be comfortable and authentically doing that task. So if you're ready to tackle imposter syndrome head on, consider joining my coaching program. It's a space where we collectively explore these challenges and uncover personal strengths that foster community, that foster support, that foster personal development. I want to live in a world where everybody's confident in their own skin. There's no space or room for imposter syndrome. There is only this space to brag about being as authentic, as flowy, as like flawlessly, what's the word? With as many flaws as possible and owning them. So I just want to remind you, overcoming imposter syndrome is a journey. It's a process. It's about embracing your success one step at a time. It's about recognizing that not only are you capable, but you're also extraordinary in your own way. You're gifted in your own way. And you need to just break down the barriers that you've built and that the world and society help you build, but that are important to destroy so that you can claim your space. So there it is. I don't know where you're going all of 2024, but if you haven't decided to be coached yet, I really encourage you to start looking. This is when all of us coaches open up our year for coaching, where you can find private coaching, group coaching, coaching in the area that you want to develop. If what you want to develop on is professionally, if you want to develop on is your own leadership skills, it's your emotional well-being, consider coming into one of my programs. We've got plenty of opportunities, and right now, even more than ever, we are expanding, we're growing, I'm bringing in more coaches. We're trying to make this coaching practice as accessible as possible. So head over to my website, see what you see in there that's exciting to you. The time of this particular podcast, we are inviting you to participate in my 12-month coaching program, Be the CEO of Your Own Life. That includes one-on-one sessions with me, plus group sessions with me, all jointly together. It also just offers the option of group sessions. But in January, we have Reset Your Mindsets for moms specifically. And it is discounted. If you buy it this year, you buy it for $1,200 as opposed to $2,000. And that is for 12 weeks of coaching. We also have private coaching and so much more to come. So head over to the show notes. Come visit my website at www.olgasway.com. And I truly hope you book a discovery call to talk to me. We get to know each other and we get to see what program works best for you. Talk to you guys soon.